Russia vowing to, quote, interrogate the Ukrainian soldiers evacuated from the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol, calling them, quote, surrendered militants. About 600 soldiers tried to defend the plant. They laid down their weapons after the weeks-long siege ended. Most who were then taken on buses to the Russian-backed separatist region of Donetsk. This, as CNN gets an exclusive up-close look at what may be one of the biggest single defeats for the Russian military in Ukraine. Sam Kiley has more from the front lines.
The first signs of a Russian disaster, a Z-marked Russian tank being salvaged by Ukrainian troops. A few days ago, this was the scene on the edge of these woods. Russian pontoon bridges under ferocious Ukrainian artillery attack. The Ukrainian commander with us casts an eye to the sky looking for Russian drones. This is no place for complacency. Ukraine and NATO have claimed that Russia suffered badly here. They estimate 70 to 80 vehicles destroyed and a whole Russian battle group of 1,000 men mauled.
So we're at the edge now of the area where the Russian armour was caught after it had crossed the pontoon river. You can see down here there's a destroyed tank, next to it an armoured personnel carrier, and if we look down the road here, we've got another armoured personnel carrier and another and another. The Ukrainians were able, they say, due to their superior reconnaissance and intelligence, to work out where the Russians were going to cross and then bring in devastating levels of artillery. And this is the result. This is only the edge of it.
Russia has now shifted its attacks elsewhere, at least for now.
When you see this, how do you feel?
Super.
Great. I understand that our artillery is working, and our troops are working too, because there was both artillery and ground fighting. The units, in cooperation with other troops, were pushing the enemy across the river on foot.
Shattered Russian armour is scattered along this path through the woodland. On the ground, we can't move forward. The track is mined.
A real disaster for the Russians, but something that the Ukrainians now are saying here that means that the pressure is off this particular front for now, and that they believe that the Russians are focusing more of their efforts elsewhere.
Ukrainian soldiers pick over the debris of this victory, but the chilling truth is that many of their comrades have ended up like this. And while this is a success in the grinding war for Ukraine, Russia remains an immediate threat.
And they've asked us to get out of here with their military commander because they're worried that our cars are going to attract attention and therefore attract incoming. This is still clearly an extremely active area.
And one, as it was for the Russians, that's a considerable relief to leave.
Now, Jake, we mentioned there that the Ukrainians believed that there was extra pressure being brought to bear by the Russians elsewhere, about 10 miles to the east in the town of Bakhmut. That's exactly what happened. There was a pretty ferocious tank battle on the outskirts of that city. At least one person was killed in some kind of missile strike in the central part of the city, and a factory was set ablaze. And that is because the Russians have been trying to punch through these Ukrainian defensive lines now for weeks, so far without success, Jake.
Sam Kiley reporting from Kramatorsk, Ukraine. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Joining us live to discuss, Ian Bremmer. He's the president of the Eurasia Group and author of a new book called The Power of Crisis, How Three Threats and Our Response Will Change the World. Ian, thanks for joining us. So Vladimir Putin undoubtedly sees today's apparent surrender in Mariupol as a huge victory for Russia. But as our last report just showed, there have also been major setbacks for Russia. Putin's forces are behind schedule. They're being pushed back in the Kharkiv region by the Ukrainians. Finland and Sweden are both racing toward NATO membership. Do you think there is any part of Putin that regrets what he's done?
Yes, I do. And I know that when he's spoken to European leaders recently, he has said that mistakes have been made on all sides, including Russia. And it's the first time I've heard that, frankly. So, I mean, look, he's getting the news. He certainly understands how many Russians are getting killed in the field. Lord knows he knows that this war is not going the way he intended the special military operation, as he calls it, to go. Even President Lukashenko, one of his very few allies on the global stage, admitted last week to his people that it's taken a lot longer. It hasn't been great. It's true that Mariupol is important in the sense that it allows the Russians not only to mop up that town of 400,000 and redeploy those troops elsewhere. It also gives them that land bridge between the Donbass and Crimea. The fear, of course, is that they're going to start actually annexing territory that they didn't hold before February 24th. And that, of course, makes the prospects of any frozen conflict or negotiations a very, very distant prospect indeed.
Let's talk about your book. You write about the threat of the next global pandemic. The COVID pandemic is hitting North Korea for the first time that we know of. Here's how Human Rights Watch explained it. Quote, North Koreans have had almost no access to the COVID vaccine, and many are chronically malnourished, leaving them with compromised immune systems. Medicines of any kind are scarce in the country. The healthcare infrastructure is extremely fragile, lacking medical supplies such as oxygen and other COVID therapeutics. How bad do you think it's going to get in North Korea? And do you think that Kim Jong-un ultimately will allow outside help?
Jake, it's like they've refused the Chinese vaccine. They don't think it's any good. The Chinese have refused to license the American, the European vaccines. It's like it's turtles all the way down. This is a global virus. It's COVID it hits every country around the world. And it's very obvious that the absence of international cooperation, as well as the absence of cooperation inside the United States, has made it a lot more expensive, a lot more painful for the world to effectively respond to. It's really sort of debilitating to watch that governments around the world just absolutely refuse to get out of their own way to follow the science on this issue. And in North Korea, I mean, given the fact that they literally have no vaccines available, I think they're the only country other than Eritrea where that's true. And they also clearly don't have the healthcare capacity. This is going to be very ugly for them. And what worries me is usually when they have that kind of a problem, they distract. And usually a distraction is another missile test, maybe a nuclear test. I'd be more worried about that in the coming weeks than I have been at any point in the past year, frankly.
You write that one of the emerging global threats is disruptive technology. You're talking about artificial intelligence or cyber weapons, sophisticated algorithms, and on and on. As you know, billionaire Elon Musk is making a tumultuous on-again, off-again bid to take over Twitter. Do you think it matters who runs Twitter? Can the CEO ultimately be more disruptive than the social media product?
Look, it's very clear that we have a lot of technologies that affect both the anxiety level of human beings, the disinformation, whether or not economies work, and cyber weapons, and even, sort of how our political system functions. In the case of Twitter, the person that runs Twitter, I mean, they decided, not because of a regulatory authority, but they decided to remove the sitting president of the United States from that platform. And Elon Musk has made very clear that if he ends up owning it, if he buys it, it doesn't look very likely at this point, that he would re-platform President Trump. So simply for that reason, I mean, this is a much more important decision in response to January 6th than anything the United States Congress or the Supreme Court has possibly done. I think that's a pretty big deal.
Eurasia Group president and author of the new book, The Power of Crisis, Ian Bremmer. Thanks so much for joining us today. Best of luck with your book.